Module 4, Strategies, Action Plans, and Targets. This module will help you develop meaningful strategies, selecting action plans to give effect to those strategies, and setting targets which reflect ambition, political will, strategies, organizational and practitioner capacity, and adequacy of resources to implement action. Mr. Howard will start Module 4.
Strategies, action plans and targets. For those of you who have targets or are looking to refine your strategies or are looking to refine your strategies, what do we need to do? The starting point really is to understand what the risks are on your network. What are the crash risks on Thailand's network, on Laos' network and so on? Know what the crash risks are, and that's quite a job. And then come up with your relevant, ambitious but realistic strategies. There's got to be stretch, but not too much. But there's got to be some tension, got to be some stretch. Then action plans to give effect to those strategies, and then getting those in place. And as we talked about earlier today, setting targets which reflect political will, ambition, and so on. In terms of understanding major crash risk on the network, here are some of the things that we need to think about. Have we got a crash data system? Some of you have, some of you haven't. Have we got good crash reporting? Have we got good offence data? Have we got behavioural surveys, seatbelt wearing rates, helmet wearing rates, mean speeds, and so on? IRAP surveys and analysis, you heard about that yesterday, reviews of the health system and more. There's many, many sources of data to guide a new strategy. There's lots of national road safety plans and strategies available you can look at and see what others are doing, and I'm sure you do that anyway as a matter of course. And they usually set that 5 or 10 year target, which is aspirational, like the Decade of Action, 50% by 2020. Some of you would be having second thoughts about that, I'd suggest. You know, I don't know how each of you are going, but 50% by 2020 is one heck of an ask if your deaths are at best stabilising. And you might look at reviewing that in the next year or so. But I'll leave that, it's just a comment, an observation. And the other point I'd make is that with a demonstration or project pipeline project, with a learning by doing approach, you put yourself in a position to really understand much more what you can do and therefore what you can achieve in the way of strategies and targets. Until you've done that, you're really working from a position of limited knowledge. And so I would encourage you to, by all means, have an action plan, but rather than launching into a full-scale strategy, get your hands grubby and get into some demonstration projects as soon as you can. And if you do that for a couple of years, you're in a much better position to put a strategy together because you've been exposed to what the realities of road safety implementation are. You're much better informed to be doing that when you've got some experience. And you know, there's lots of people who are well-meaning and they produce strategies that are a fair way off the mark because people haven't had the experience to know what they can do. So my advice to people is always, don't jump into a strategy. Have actions. You've got to do something today. You can't wait for the world to go past. Have an action plan. Do some demonstration projects though, and out of those, in 2 to 3 years' time, you'll learn a lot. And then put a strategy together that reflects your learnings. This is a PIARC document, comparison of national road safety policies and plans. It's available on the PIARC website. You might need to be a PIARC member to get it, but your road authorities almost certainly are members. It's a very thick document, but it will list policies, strategies, penalties, a lot of detail from a lot of countries around the world, and might be useful when you're looking at your next strategy. It's the most extensive compendium of data on this topic that exists. A strategy should have a good quantitative target. It's hard to do. And these people, Castle and Camille Lukota, they say a strategy should have a quantitative target, policy objectives, special budget, new design, safety measures, integrated community programs, new technologies. But they say the major factors are political will, proper organisation and knowledge, and we've talked about a lot of that today. But I'll just make the point about political will. You won't get political will, usually, unless the politicians are being pushed a bit and feel confident in you. And they need to know that 24/7 they'll be supported if they go out on a bit of a limb and show a bit of leadership and say we're going to do something. They need to know they can contact you and get back up when the media gets onto them, and they won't be left looking foolish because they haven't got the information. You've got to support them. Once you put them out there, you've got to look after them. And they'll make judgments about whether you're going to look after them before they'll take that leap. Strategies should be ambitious, but they have to be realistic. There's an old saying, aim for the stars and you'll get over the trees. Well, there's probably a sensible midway mark there. And I'm cautioning you about being over-realistic. Over-promising and under-delivering is always difficult. I'm certainly not saying don't have a target and don't show some ambition, but keep the ambition within reasonable bounds. Recognise the level of knowledge, your capacities, and awareness by the community at the political level in the establishment phase. That's that first flat phase of the curve. We'll come back to that in a minute. But recognise when you're still building up skill and knowledge, you can't change the world. We'll like to, but you can't do it in 5 minutes. The 5 pillars, of course, should be the basis for the strategy. And strategy development and rollout, it's a journey. It's a journey that you're all going on. It's a fantastic journey. It has its ups and downs, its disappointments, but it has some tremendous highs. Make sure you celebrate tremendous highs. When that helmet legislation goes through in Cambodia, put on a party. If I'm around, I'll come. But it's very important to celebrate the wins because there are many of them, but so often we say, what's the next problem? Pause to reflect on what you learnt from that process. This curve, it brings us back to ambition. Where are we on the curve with our knowledge? And most of us are here. And much as we'd like to be up here, we've got to build the steps, the foundations, then the steps to get there. And we talked about the management structures today as a means of getting there, and the safe system approach as the intellectual framework for saying we have a means of eradicating death and serious injury in the long term. It's all part of the investment build-up. This is what I'm talking about with make sure your ambition is not... It's not a matter of ambition being too great, it's perhaps being unaware of some of the challenges and barriers you will face to implementation. And it's simply saying, while we'd all like to do this with our performance in road safety and our reduction in fatalities, just straight away go up here and do this, the reality is it will take time, take a build-up over time to do that. Don't be fearful of that. The key thing is to get up here. It doesn't really matter if it's 2028 or 2032 or 2033. What matters is that that is the trajectory. And that every year you can point to something you've done that is helping you along that path. So I've talked about demonstration projects and pipeline projects to build your knowledge, and capacity reviews to assess where you are, where your country's at, where are the things you need to do to get your management arrangements right, and your interventions and your results. But you've got to do these things as well. You can't stop doing the things that you're doing now. And some of you have got reasonable enforcement, some of you have got no enforcement. Some enforcement would be nice. You know, we need to find a way to get some enforcement happening. Electronic enforcement offers great potential. There is no more direct dose-response relationship in life than drivers' and riders' response to police enforcement. Nothing more direct in the world. I've seen it so often. Put up the level of speed enforcement in terms of intensity, up go the infringements, down come the deaths. Put up the level of drink driving enforcement, up go the drink driving infringements, down come the deaths. Things get a little complacent, the enforcement drops off a bit, number of drink driving tests falls down, up go the deaths. It is incredible. Vehicle safety initiatives, don't let that slip past you. Cars are being built today in ASEAN countries that will be around for another 20 years on your roads. Let's make sure they're the safest possible cars that these communities are willing to pay for. There's an information issue there, let the public know. But let the public know that safe cars matter. Vehicle safety initiatives, don't let that slip past you. Cars are being built today in ASEAN countries that will be around for another 20 years on your roads. Let's make sure they're the safest possible cars that these communities are willing to pay for. There's an information issue there, let the public know. But let the public know that safe cars matter. If you haven't got knowledge and management capacity, it's difficult to set up a truly scientifically based strategy in day one. I've talked about learning by doing, and then you can put a strategy together from that position of improved insight. Actions are more important than strategies in those early intervening years. Have a few actions, a number of actions that you follow up. And as the second point is really saying you can have a sophisticated strategy, but the reality is you're not going to be able to implement it in the early years because you haven't got the institutional management infrastructure in place. Components of a strategy, most of you know this, there's plenty of good examples available. Good strategies are based on safe system, they're based on the UN Decade of Action 5 pillars. And of course, if you want to get into the growth and consolidation stages, then you really do need a very sophisticated strategy, but you've got to be ready to do that. Action plans themselves are quite interesting. Action plans are often regarded as straightforward matters. Well, they're not. There are so many activities that often have to be delivered to deliver an action. There might be 100 activities to be undertaken to deliver one action. And some may be simpler than that, but most are not. Can't read that, but that's an example of an action plan in one country in this region for a safety management system for buses where when we looked at all of the elements that had to be implemented, it went out for something like 5 or 6 years rather than 1 year. This is the reality check that you get when you start to really plan out the activities needed to get an action home, far less a strategy. So activity planning for every action you're going to implement, very important. This gives you the ammunition to go to your superiors and to government and say, we need more money to deliver this. We want to do it, but here are the facts. We've thought it through. Here's the time we need. Here's the resources we need. Here are the steps. And an ambitious vision does support the alignment of the key players. The community, you folk and government thinking, and getting that interim target to happen and in place, and the long-term vision agreed. So, you know, it's getting everybody lined up into a realistic, acceptable and deliverable outcome. Inevitably, targets get involved in political considerations, don't they? Politicians are reluctant to go too far ahead of what they think is deliverable. That's the confidence thing again. If you go to them and say, we can deliver this and here's how we can do it, and they are confident that your advice is sound, they will probably back you. To the extent that they're fearful that you haven't got enough kudos with them yet, enough experience, they might resist it. So trust is important at the political level. Look at the Dutch minister when he went to Parliament in 2010. What he's saying is, we could reduce casualties far more if we were to make fundamentally different choices. Free up funds for road safety or limit the freedom of drivers, cyclists and pedestrians. Those are not the choices I'm making now. So he was saying, I'm not going to put more money in than we're putting in. That sometimes happens, as you well know. But at least he was honest enough to say this. Very few politicians would. And it does reflect the decision-making tension that always confronts government. Lots of demands, limited resources, where do I put my money? And the answer is the stronger your argument, the greater your credibility, the more evidence-based what it is you're putting together, and the more you've delivered, even in a small way in the past, the greater your chances of getting a look in. So targets can be aspirational or they can be based on quantitative modelling. So you can say we're going to get 50%, or you can say we're going to go away and work out what reductions we'll get if we do each of these actions and calculate percentage reductions, add them multiplicatively so that you don't double count, and come up with a, say, 35% reduction. That's the background I have. We've always worked on quantitative modelling, and it's not without its risks, it's estimation, but it's not too bad. The Europeans, on the other hand, have always used aspirational modelling to say we're going to that top of that hill and we're going to get 50%. And in their defence, it's been reasonably effective. So there's not a right way or a wrong way, there are just different ways of doing it. And in the early stages of your road safety development, you really haven't got any choice than to go down the aspirational path, because you haven't yet got the tools to help you do that quantitative modelling. Western Australia put together a safe system matrix when they modelled their strategy, and it was good stuff. Roads, see the pillars, roads and roadsides, speeds, which is split out in the safe system version that we always use, but speeds is mobility in that pillar too, on the other UN pillars, safe vehicle, safe road use. And they looked at all of Western Australia, big state of desert and bush, Perth metropolitan area, regional Western Australia and remote Western Australia. They split it into three categories because they felt the countermeasures overall and then the countermeasures in particular areas were different depending on the geographic part of that area. And that's true in any country. What you will do in your regions, in your rural areas, is quite different to what you'll do in your cities. And it may be, if you take a place like Indonesia, the things you would do in Sumbawa on NTB, which is a minor island out to the west of Bali and Java, would be different to what you'd do in Java. Very different volumes of traffic and intensity of use and so on. So this is a reminder that one size doesn't fit all. You need to cut your cloth to suit what it is you're dealing with. In Western Australia, they came up with the following results in modelling their target, in coming up with initiatives and estimating what that would develop based on various sophisticated models they developed at Monash University. They said if we improve infrastructure as we're suggesting, which was largely roadside barriers to deal with runoff road crashes. This is a constituency with low volumes of traffic really. So runoff road's a problem. We'd get this reduction in cumulative serious crashes over the life of the strategy. If we came up with speed reductions, that's speed limits, we'd get this reduction in serious casualties. If we have speed enforcement that's enhanced, we get this. Vehicle safety will give us that. Behaviour improvement will give us this. Look at that. Look at what a conscious campaign to slightly reduce speed limits would have given them compared to other measures. Never forget kinetic energy is the thing that kills people. Never forget its powerful role in any strategy that you put forward. If you don't have a speed problem, that's fine. Make sure you don't get one, if that's the case. Don't allow it to develop, because it can happen. It can build up over time. But above all, recognise that management of speed offers you tremendous benefits. The Norwegians have road safety management by objectives. There's a different way of doing it. They say, well, there's our overall target. We're going to get a 50% reduction. We've got 12 sub-targets for road user behaviour. We've got 6 for vehicle safety, and we've got 3 for safety of the road system. So that's a very different way of tackling it. Quantitative, but based on sub-targets that add up to split across the pillars. Indonesia has its National Road Safety Master Plan. It's Erawinka, and it's an excellent document. It's based on the UN Decade of Action, the 5 pillars, and it's guiding their actions that they have to implement. And they've got a presidential instruction that requires them to implement these actions by a certain time, by agency. It's a pretty good model of accountability, and I think they're to be commended on what they've done. Malaysia, I understand, has used a modelling approach to road safety through Miros's guidance. That's good practice. This question I'm asking here, should strategy drive targets or should targets drive strategy? And I think the further you go up towards that growth phase, the more you're saying that strategy should drive targets. In the early stages, you're saying targets should drive strategy, because you can't be sure what it is you're going to achieve. But as you get more knowledge, more experience, you can say, yes, we're going to achieve these things, and that'll give us this outcome. You've got targets in the interim for final outcomes, for serious injury as well as fatalities. Don't forget serious injuries. And that PIARC report I showed you before about national road safety policies indicated that 50% of respondents indicated they would have serious injuries included in their national targets. That's final outcomes. So many intermediate outcomes you can devise. I've got one there that I think is really relevant for a number of countries here. truck rear light operating rates at night. What proportion of heavy trucks on your national highways have got operating rear lights? Easily measured, easily measured. Something that the local state governor can get quite involved in, quite exercised about, readily measurable. The rate of minors driving at pre-licence age, really common, isn't it, for kids to get on motorbikes? Kids of 13 and 14 ride motorbikes to school. That's something that's got to be addressed. The kids got to school before the motorbikes were around. I know buses have dropped away and all of those things, but it's not sensible. It's a bit like your issue with the helmets. It's not sensible to say, because we haven't got the public transport alternatives, we'll allow the kids to put their lives at risk. There needs to be a more sophisticated discussion than that. And outputs, the number of speed checks, the number of things that police do, the number of intersections treated by the road authority, the number of emergency medical responses to crashes, and we're seeing a growing trend now of people being admitted to hospital without all these financial hurdles being put in their way. Without question, they get taken to a hospital and treated for at least a couple of days, and that's a great thing. That's much faster access to emergency medical care, certainly happening in India and in some countries in ASEAN as well. So adopting robust interim targets, I've talked about all of that. Have a look at what others are doing. You've got great case studies in this room. You've seen what the other countries are doing. You can all learn from each other. And I predict that if this group were to meet in 2 years' time, the conversations from here and between you about what you're doing would be substantial. That's what we want. So modelling processes with targets, bottom up as I call them, is important when you've got management capability and research support of a high standard. If you're going to model targets, it gives you the chance to have the conversation with the politicians before you announce the target. You can say to the politicians, you want this, here's what you've got to do. And they say, oh goodness no, we're not doing that. We'll do that, but not that. It gives you a dialogue beforehand. And then when you announce your target, your strategies to achieve that have been agreed at the political level. That's useful.